Amina was a young girl who had known sorrow for most of her life. She lost her parents when she was still small, and since then, her world had been filled with hardship. After her parents' passing, she was left in the care of her stepmother, Mama Dupe. Many people thought Mama Dupe would raise Amina with care and kindness, but the truth was very different. Instead of showing love, Mama Dupe treated her like a servant. Every morning, before the sun had even touched the rooftops, Amina was already awake. She would sweep the floors, wash the clothes, fetch water from the well, and prepare food for Mama Dupe and her children. She was never allowed to rest. If she made a mistake, even the smallest one, Mama Dupe would shout at her or slap her. Amina's days were long and heavy, filled with endless work and no joy. The only comfort she found was in the quiet moments of night, when everyone was asleep, and she could whisper to herself, pretending her mother was still listening somewhere far away. But as the years passed, her stepmother's cruelty only grew. Mama Dupe never called her by name with affection. She only said, "Amina, do this. Amina, fetch that." There was no soft word, no hug, no smile. Amina longed for love, but her heart was always left empty. One evening, after a long day at the market, Mama Dupe came home with a decision that would change Amina's life forever. She called her into the small, dark room and said coldly, "You are no longer a child. You must marry. A man has agreed to take you. His name is Tunde. He is poor, but at least he will feed you. You must leave this house soon." Amina's heart dropped. She had never met this man, and the thought of being forced into marriage filled her with fear. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, life would one day bring her a little happiness. But now, it seemed her future would only bring more sadness. She wanted to refuse, to say she was not ready, but she had no voice in Mama Dupe's house. Her stepmother's word was final. That night, Amina cried silently into her thin pillow. She did not want to marry a stranger, especially one who was poor and struggling, for she already knew too much about hunger and suffering. She prayed softly, asking God why her life had been filled with pain since the beginning. "Why me?" she whispered again and again. But no answer came, only the sound of her tears. The next days passed quickly. Mama Dupe did not waste time. She arranged everything for the marriage without asking Amina what she felt. People in the neighborhood whispered when they saw Amina. Some pitied her, but no one dared to stand up against Mama Dupe. They knew her to be a woman with a sharp tongue and a bitter heart. On the morning of the marriage, Amina wore a simple dress, one that was old and faded. There were no fine clothes, no gold jewelry, no laughter, and no music. She looked at herself in the small broken mirror and almost did not recognize the girl staring back. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale with fear. She wanted to run away, but where would she go? She had no family, no friends, no place to hide. When she was brought out to meet Tunde, she lowered her head. She did not want to see his face. She thought he would be cruel like Mama Dupe, or careless like the many people who had ignored her suffering before. All she could feel was a heavy sadness pressing down on her heart. During the small ceremony, Amina barely heard the words being spoken. Her mind was filled with questions about her future. Would this new home be worse than the one she was leaving? Would her husband treat her like a slave, just as Mama Dupe had done? She was afraid of what was to come. When it was over, and she was led away as Tunde's wife, she turned back once to look at Mama Dupe. But her stepmother showed no sign of sadness or regret. She only folded her arms and nodded with satisfaction, as though she had rid herself of a burden. That image stayed in Amina's heart like a scar. That night, lying on the small mat in Tunde's house, Amina closed her eyes and remembered her parents. She thought of the days when her mother held her hand, when her father told her stories by the fire. Those memories felt like dreams now, far away, almost lost. She wished she could go back, but life had already pushed her into a path she did not choose. She whispered again, "Is this my life forever? Only sadness, only tears." The silence of the night gave her no reply. Only her heart answered with a dull ache. And so, Amina's story in that moment was one of sorrow and helplessness. She did not know what lay ahead, but deep inside, a small spark of hope still lived. She did not see it yet, but the journey she feared was about to lead her to something greater than she had ever imagined. Though she thought her life would only bring more pain, destiny was quietly waiting to surprise her. The wedding was small, almost too small for Amina to call it a wedding. There were no bright fabrics, no drums or dancing, no crowd of neighbors singing joy. Only a few words, a few witnesses, and then silence. Amina stood there in her old faded dress, her hands trembling as she felt her heart sink deeper into sorrow. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, marriage would feel like a new beginning, but to her it only felt like another chain being tied around her. Mama Dupe sat in the corner during the ceremony, her face hard and satisfied. She did not look at Amina with love, nor did she whisper words of comfort. To her, it was enough that Amina was leaving her house. She believed she had done her duty, even if it was without kindness. Amina did not expect anything else, but deep inside, she wished her stepmother would at least look at her once with warmth. That wish never came true. When it was over, Amina followed her new husband, Tunde, to his home. Her steps were heavy, as though each one was pulling her deeper into an unknown world. She did not raise her eyes to look at him. She had already decided that this man was another burden placed on her life. If her stepmother had chosen him, surely it could only mean more suffering. But when she stepped into his small home, her heart gave a pause. The house was simple, one room with a mat, a wooden chair, and a small pot sitting in the corner, but it was clean and orderly. Amina expected dust and darkness, but instead she found a quiet place that felt safe in a way she had not felt before. She stood still, unsure of what to say. Then Tunde turned to her. His voice was calm, softer than she imagined. "You must be tired," he said gently. "Sit down. You are welcome here." Amina looked at him in surprise. His words were not sharp. His eyes were not hard. She saw no anger in his face. Instead, she saw kindness, something she had long forgotten in her life. Still, she stayed quiet, afraid to trust what she was seeing. She had been hurt too many times by people who showed false faces. She sat slowly on the mat, her eyes on the ground. Tunde did not press her. He moved quietly, giving her water to drink, and placed a small plate of food before her. The food was not much, just yam porridge with a little pepper, but it was offered with respect. Amina had spent years cooking for others without ever being given care in return. Now here was this man, poor in wealth, but offering her food like she was worthy. Her heart trembled with confusion. For the first time in years, she ate without fear of being shouted at. Every bite felt strange, as though she was tasting kindness itself. Later that night, when she lay down on the mat, Tunde spoke again. "I know this is not easy for you. I cannot promise riches, but I promise respect. You will not be treated as a servant here. This is your home too." Amina could not believe her ears. She turned her face away so he would not see the tears in her eyes. No one had spoken to her like that in so long. She had been called worthless, lazy, or cursed, but never spoken to as if she mattered. She wept silently, her heart slowly beginning to soften. Days turned into weeks. Amina expected that one morning, Tunde would change, that his kindness was only a mask. But it did not happen. He continued to rise early, work hard in the fields, and return with a quiet smile. He asked her opinion before making decisions in the house, something Mama Dupe never did. When she made mistakes in cooking or cleaning, he did not shout, he only helped. The villagers who passed by often mocked Tunde for being poor. They called him the struggling farmer, and whispered that his wife would soon regret her fate. Amina heard their words and felt fear in her heart. But when she looked at Tunde, she saw a man who did not bend under the weight of insults. He carried himself with calm strength, his head held high, as though he knew something others did not. Slowly, Amina began to see him differently. The more time she spent with him, the more she realized that he was not like the men Mama Dupe had warned her about. He never raised his hand against her, never used harsh words, never treated her as less than him. He gave her space to heal from her pain, and little by little, she began to breathe more freely. One evening, when the sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, Amina found herself smiling for the first time in a long while. She was helping Tunde plant seeds in the small garden. Her hands were dirty, her dress covered with soil, but she felt a strange joy in her chest. Tunde noticed and said quietly, "That smile suits you. Keep it. You deserve it." Amina froze. No one had ever told her she deserved happiness. She lowered her eyes, her cheeks warm, but deep inside her, something new began to grow, hope. The marriage that had begun in sorrow was slowly turning into something she had never dreamed of. She did not yet know the secrets hidden in Tunde's life, but she knew one truth: her stepmother had been wrong. The man she had been forced to marry was not a curse, but perhaps, just perhaps, a blessing waiting to reveal itself. And so, the girl who had thought her life would always be filled with pain found herself standing at the edge of a new chapter, one where kindness lived in the heart of the man she now called husband. At first, Amina thought her new life with Tunde would remain simple. She had accepted the small house, the quiet meals, and the hard work in the garden. Yet, as days turned into weeks, she began to notice things that did not match the picture of a poor man that everyone, even her stepmother, believed. Tunde often left very early in the morning before the sun touched the rooftops. He would return late at night, sometimes looking tired but never truly weary like the farmer she saw in the village. His hands were not rough, his clothes not torn, and even though his home was small, there was always enough food. Amina wondered how this could be. If he was only a poor farmer, why did he not live like one? One evening, she watched from the window as a black car, shiny and expensive, stopped outside the small path that led to their house. It was the kind of car only rich men in the city drove. Two men in fine suits stepped out. They looked around carefully, as if they wanted no one to see them, and then walked straight to Tunde. Amina's heart raced. She hid behind the curtain, listening to their voices from a distance. She could not hear everything, but she caught pieces of their words. They spoke of business, investments, and something about land. Tunde nodded calmly, spoke in a tone that sounded far more confident than she had ever heard him use at home. When the men left, Amina ran back to her seat, pretending she had not seen anything. She did not know what to ask, or even if she should. But her mind was restless. Who were those men? Why did they come to see her husband, the man everyone believed was poor? The next morning, when Tunde was preparing to leave again, she finally asked in a quiet voice, "Tunde, why do these rich men come to our house? What do they want with you?" Tunde looked at her, and for a moment, his eyes softened. Then he smiled, that calm smile that always left her confused, and said gently, "One day, Amina, you will understand. For now, trust me." Those words stayed with her. One day, you will understand. She wanted to believe him, but her heart carried questions that had no answers. She remembered her stepmother's harsh words, telling her she was marrying a poor man who could give her nothing. But the more she watched Tunde, the less those words seemed true. There were days when he would leave with nothing but return with bags of rice, yam, and even fabric for her. When she asked where he got them, he would only say, "Work rewarded me." Yet, she knew no ordinary farmer earned gifts like these. Sometimes, she caught him reading letters with strange seals or signing papers with a pen far too fine for a man of his supposed means. Once, she even saw him holding a phone that looked like the kind used only by wealthy men in the city. When he noticed her eyes on it, he quickly put it away and changed the subject. Amina's heart was torn between curiosity and fear. Was her husband hiding something dangerous? Or was he someone entirely different from what the world thought? Her nights became restless. She would lie awake, listening for the sound of his footsteps when he returned late. Sometimes, she would hear the faint hum of another car stopping outside in the dark, voices low and serious. Yet, whenever she asked, his answer remained the same, "One day, you will understand." Despite the mystery, Tunde never stopped treating her with kindness. He spoke gently, he never raised his voice, and he always made sure she felt safe. This made Amina even more confused. If he truly was hiding something, why was there no cruelty in him? Why did he care for her so deeply? One afternoon, when she was sweeping outside, a neighbor whispered to her, "Your husband is not what you think. We see men come to him. Important men. But he hides it well. Be careful, Amina. Sometimes, poor men carry secrets that can burn." Those words only deepened the questions in her mind. She thanked the neighbor but walked away with her heart heavy. What if Tunde was hiding something too big for her to bear? Yet, every time she looked at him, every time he smiled at her with gentle eyes, she felt her fear fade a little. She remembered the pain her stepmother had caused her, the harshness, the cruelty. Tunde was nothing like that. He had given her peace in a life where she thought there would only be sorrow. Still, the strange visits, the long absences, and the wealth hidden behind his simple life could not be ignored. One night, when the moon was high, she asked him again, her voice shaking, "Tunde, who are you truly? I cannot sleep because my heart is full of questions." He looked at her for a long time, and this time, his smile was softer, almost sad. He placed a hand on hers and said, "Patience, Amina. The truth is bigger than what words can carry tonight. But I promise you, when the time is right, you will see who I am. And you will know why everything happened the way it did." His words left her both comforted and restless. She could feel that he carried a secret, a truth so large it could change everything. And though she did not yet know what it was, a part of her heart whispered that her life was about to transform in ways she had never dreamed. The night was quiet, the kind of night where even the crickets seemed to whisper secrets to the air. Amina sat by the doorway of their small home, her hands folded in her lap. She had grown used to Tunde's calm silences, his gentle care, and his mysterious disappearances. But that night felt different. He came home earlier than usual, his face carrying a seriousness she had not seen before. Tunde walked toward her and sat down beside her. For a moment, he did not speak. He only looked at her, his eyes filled with something heavy, something deep. Amina's heart beat faster. She felt the weight of the silence pressing on her chest. Finally, he said softly, "Amina, I think it is time you know the truth." Her hands trembled slightly. She nodded, though she did not know if she was ready. For weeks, for months, she had wondered who he really was. She had dreamed of answers, but now that they were near, she felt fear and hope mixing inside her like fire and water. Tunde took a long breath. "I am not the man your stepmother thought I was. I am not just a poor villager." His voice was steady, calm, yet full of emotion. "I am a wealthy man. A billionaire. The men you saw visit me, the cars, the papers, those were not lies of the night. They were glimpses of the life I keep hidden." Amina's mouth opened, but no words came out. The truth struck her heart like thunder. She looked at him, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. He continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "I chose to live this way, quietly, because I wanted something money could never buy. I wanted a wife who would see me, not my wealth. A woman who would not be blinded by riches, but who could love me for who I truly am. When your stepmother forced you to marry me, I saw the pain in your eyes. Yet, I also saw your strength. I knew then that fate had brought us together." Tears filled Amina's eyes, spilling over her cheeks. She pressed her hands against her mouth, unable to believe what she was hearing. The man she had thought was poor, the man she had worried about feeding and supporting, was one of the richest men in the land. Her heart raced. She felt dizzy with shock, but beneath the storm inside her, there was something else, something warm. She thought of the kindness Tunde had shown her, the respect in his voice, the gentleness in his hands. None of that had been a lie. That had been real, truer than anything her stepmother had ever given her. You are a billionaire," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "Yes," he said quietly, "but more than that, I am still the man who gave you a home when you had none, the man who respects you, the man who loves you. The wealth is only paper and numbers, but my heart is yours." Amina wept, not out of fear but out of overwhelming relief. She thought of all the suffering she had endured in her stepmother's house, of all the times she had prayed in secret for a life of peace. And here she was, not only with peace but with love and truth. Her forced marriage, which had begun in sorrow, had become the door to joy. Tunde reached for her hand and held it gently. "I could have told you earlier, but I wanted to be sure. I wanted to see your heart. And Amina, your heart is pure. You have shown me compassion, patience, and trust, even when you had reasons to doubt. You are the blessing I never knew I needed." Amina shook her head, tears still running down her face. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. But Tunde smiled. "You do. You deserve more than this. From today, you will never cry from pain again. From today, you will know what it means to be loved fully." They sat in silence, but it was not the silence of confusion anymore. It was the silence of hearts speaking without words. Amina leaned against him, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly safe. As the night stretched on, she thought about how her stepmother had mocked her, saying she was marrying a poor man, that her life would be nothing but shame. Yet, the truth was brighter than she could ever have imagined. Her stepmother's cruelty had unknowingly pushed her into the arms of the very man who would lift her higher than she ever dreamed. The revelation changed everything. But what remained in Amina's heart was not the wealth, it was the love. Wealth could buy fine clothes, large houses, and golden jewelry, but it could not buy the look in Tunde's eyes when he said she was his blessing. It could not buy the safety she felt when his hand held hers. That night, as she lay beside him, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. She no longer feared the future. She no longer felt trapped in the chains of her stepmother's cruelty. She had been given a second chance at life, and this time, her life was filled with hope. For Amina, the greatest shock was not that her husband was a billionaire. It was that kindness, patience, and love had turned her forced marriage into the greatest gift she could ever receive. And for Tunde, the revelation was not only about showing his truth. It was about proving that even in a world full of lies and greed, pure love could still be found. Together, they stepped into a new chapter, no longer bound by secrets, but free in the strength of their hearts. When the truth finally came out, the whole town buzzed with whispers. People could hardly believe it. The same man who had been mocked as a poor villager, the man who had lived in a small, simple house, was in fact one of the richest men in the land. His name was on businesses, lands, and estates that people had only heard about in passing. The story spread like fire in the wind. Everyone wanted to talk about it, everyone wanted to see it for themselves. Mema Dupe was the most shocked of all. The woman who had forced Amina to marry Tunde out of cruelty stood frozen when the news reached her ears. Her pride fell, her arrogance crumbled. The man she had insulted, the one she had told Amina was worthless, was richer than she could ever dream. 4 days she could not speak without shame burning in her throat. But Amina and Tunde did not go to her to boast. They did not go to show her that she was wrong. Instead, they carried themselves with grace, letting the truth speak for itself. At first, the people expected revenge. They thought Tunde would send guards to humiliate Mema Dupe, or that Amina would return to mock her stepmother for all the pain she had suffered. But no such thing happened. Instead, Amina's heart chose a different path. She remembered the years of tears, of doing endless chores, of being called worthless, and she thought to herself, if I rise now, I will rise with kindness, not bitterness. Together, Amina and Tunde used their wealth in a way that surprised everyone. They began to build schools for children who had no education. In villages where young boys and girls had to walk miles just to learn how to read, new classrooms rose from the ground. Amina visited the schools often, smiling at the children and encouraging them. They called her Mama Amina, and their laughter became her reward. They also built hospitals, places where mothers could bring their sick children without fear of being turned away for lack of money. Tunde brought doctors from across the country, and Amina made sure every patient was treated with dignity. Families who once thought sickness was a death sentence now found healing in the walls that love had built. Homes for the homeless soon followed. Streets that were once filled with people sleeping in corners and alleys now saw families moving into small but safe houses. Amina would walk through those homes, speaking to the women, listening to their stories, sharing her own. She told them that she too had once been helpless, an orphan with no one to defend her. Her honesty gave them strength, for they saw in her a reflection of themselves. The town changed. Where there had once been despair, there was now hope. Where there had been gossip and cruelty, there was now respect and admiration. People began to see that Amina was not only Tunde's wife, not only the woman who had shocked them by marrying a billionaire in disguise, she was a symbol of transformation. Her life became proof that one's beginnings do not decide one's future, and that love and kindness can lift a person higher than gold or diamonds ever could. Mema Dupe, ashamed and broken, tried to stay hidden. But Amina, in her gentle heart, did not leave her behind. One day, she visited her stepmother, not with anger, but with calmness. Mema Dupe wept as she saw Amina standing tall and radiant, her face glowing with joy instead of bitterness. She fell to her knees and begged for forgiveness. Amina lifted her up and simply said, I forgive you. You tried to destroy me, but in doing so, you pushed me toward my blessing. The people were stunned again, for forgiveness was harder than revenge. Yet Amina chose it freely. That act of mercy made her even more respected. Tunde watched her with pride. To him, the greatest wealth was not the money he had in banks, but the woman beside him who carried so much grace in her soul. He often said to his friends, riches can build palaces, but only love can build a home. And Amina has built a home not just for me, but for many. Their marriage blossomed, not because of riches, but because of the deep respect they had for one another. They worked as partners, side by side, not as master and follower. When decisions were made, Amina's voice was heard, and when dreams were planted, her hands watered them until they grew. Soon, their story spread beyond the town. Newspapers wrote about them, children sang songs of Amina the Kind, and people in faraway places spoke of how one orphan girl became a queen of hearts. The world saw not just Tunde the billionaire, but also the woman who had once been called worthless and who now stood as a light for others. For Amina, the journey was not about the shock of discovering her husband's wealth. It was about finding love where she least expected it, and then using that love to heal others. She often said, true love is richer than any treasure, because it gives without asking and shines without end. Her words echoed through villages, through schools, through hospitals, and through homes. They were repeated by children and elders, by men and women who had seen what kindness could do. And as long as Amina lived, her life remained a story of transformation, a reminder that cruelty can be turned into compassion, that loss can be turned into gain, and that the deepest wounds can be healed by love. In the end, Amina was no longer just the orphan who had been forced into marriage. She became the woman who carried light into the darkest places. And Tunde, though he had wealth beyond measure, knew that his greatest treasure was the woman by his side. Together, They proved to the world that when love and kindness guide the heart, no wealth can compare.